I'll be reading from Proverbs 3, 1 to 12. The title of the message is, Be Not Wise in Your Own Eyes. And in this passage, a father is giving 6 instructions to his son on how to wisely live his life. And as we shall see, this father follows a 2-part pattern of instruction. He does the what, and then he does the why. He tells his son what he should do, and then he goes on to tell him why he should do it. It's very easy for parents to tell their children what they should do without telling them why they should do it, because it takes a lot more energy to tell a child why they should do what you ask them to do. It's easy for a parent to say, all right, go sit and time out. But then the parent doesn't take time out to tell their children why they had to sit in time out. But what we learn from this passage is this father sets an example for us in that he obviously took a lot of time to explain why his son should do what he asked his son to do, because that's what the whole passage is about. In the press of life, many times parents don't have the time to explain why. And there certainly are many, many times when a parent tells a child what to do without explaining why, even if the child can't understand, or if you don't have time to explain why. If you don't have time in the moment, it can be helpful to mark that moment in your mind and then come back to it later and sit down with the child and say, now let me explain why I ask you to do something or not to do something. When a parent does that, the child can sense that the parent is in fact investing in the child. And when the child feels that investment, it helps to develop a heart-to-heart relationship between the parent and the child. And we see in this passage that very much so the heart is featured. And there's God's will that parents and children have a heart-to-heart relationship. So let's read the passage. Proverbs 3, 1 to 12. Here's the first instruction. It's 2 verses long. Here's the what. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Here's the why. For length of days and years of life and peace will be added to you. So there's a total of these 6 instructions. Here's the second one. Here's the what. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Here's the why. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. A third instruction. Here's the what. This is Melissa's verse. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. Why? If you do that, he will make straight your paths. The fourth instruction, here's the what. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. That's the why. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones if you're not wise in your own eyes. The fifth instruction, here's the what. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of your produce. Here's the why. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. That's the why. The sixth and last instruction, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. Why? For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father reproves the son in whom he delights. So let's look at each of these 6 instructions. The first instruction, what is the what? My son, do not forget my teachings, but let your heart keep my commandment. The why? For length of days and years of life and peace will be added to you. So the end goal here is children who obey with their hearts. It comes from the inside. So this father has a set of teachings, notice, that he calls my teachings, because he's asking the son to heed his teachings, or my teachings, with his heart. So every parent needs to ask the question, what are my set of teachings? How do I determine what I will teach? And can I defend what I teach against what they learn on social media, against what their peers teach them, against what their teachers might teach them at school? How in this world can you expect your children to listen to your voice above all the other voices? The answer to that question, I think, does emerge in verses 3 and 4 coming up. And what we see is that the parent isn't just saying what they think, the parent is saying what God thinks. So to go against the parent, in fact, is to go against God. And if children understand that to go against the parent is to go against God, that can be seen as a serious matter. When the parent, him or herself, is submitted to the Lord, the child feels secure in submitting to the parent, because the parent is demonstrating submission that is expected of the child. So when the father says, do not forget my teachings are really God's teachings. One of the greatest challenges of parenting is to transfer what is in your heart to your child's heart, so that your child has a heart to obey you. If a child has a heart to obey you, it makes parenting delightful and so much easier. Let your heart keep my commandments, is what this father said to his son. So what is needed is a heart-to-heart relationship. One of the things I did with my children when they were growing up to develop this heart-to-heart relationship, I often made up a list of chores for them to do, and they needed to go through the list sequentially, get everything done, but I would embed in this list some fun things to do, like go shoot 10 baskets or play this game with each other, just to help them see that I'm all about them having fun. I am for them. I'm not against them. Children having a heart to keep your commandments is within reach, especially when you have a heart-to-heart relationship with them. The more the child's heart is connected to the parent's heart, the harder it's going to be for the child to go against your commandment, go against your heart. I remember when I was a boy, my father was a pastor, and we had a lot of siblings, and we had to sit on the front bench. And I had a mirror during the service, and I thought, I'm going to have fun with this mirror. And so I'd hold the mirror up like this, and I was looking at people behind me. And everybody was looking at the mirror, and they weren't looking at my dad who was preaching. Well, my dad brought it up. And I realized how I had made it difficult for him, and that he, in fact, was disappointed with me. And I remember that hurt my heart, because I had a heart-to-heart relationship with my father. When I was 14 years old, I started really getting into secular rock and roll. I loved it. I was sleeping in one morning. I woke up, turned my radio on, listening to my rock station, WNCI, I even remember it, out of Columbus, Ohio. My mother came into my bedroom. She gently sat on the edge of my bed, and she asked me this question. She said, James, Do you hear what they are saying in that song? She knew, I knew, that the words in that song were undermining everything that she wanted to teach me about following the Lord. And what I remember about that is her heart that she had for me. She wasn't yelling at me. She wasn't screaming at me. She wasn't even scolding me. She just asked me a question. And I know that my parents' hearts for me were a great restraining force in my life when I was very tempted to just live a wild life. So what is the what? My son, do not forget my teachings. Let your heart keep my commandments. Why? For length of days and years of life and peace will be added to you. When we follow God's way, when we live with the grain of the universe, there in fact are many blessings and benefits that come along with doing that. For length of days and years of life and peace will be added to you. Length of days is quantity. Peace is quality. A long and good life is the benefit. Some years ago, I performed a funeral for a young adult who had overdosed. She had disregarded her mother's instructions concerning drugs. Had this young adult child heeded her mother's instructions, it literally would have added length of days to her life and potential years of peace. And there was a moment before the service actually began, I'll never forget. This young adult was herself a young mother with a 6-year-old girl. The 6-year-old girl went and picked one of the roses. She carried it up to the casket, open casket. She opened her mother's hand and put the rose in her hand and closed it. How many wonderful, peaceful moments could this mother have had with her daughter had she heeded her mother's instructions? The second instruction, verses 3 and 4, the end goal is children who find favor with God and man. What is the what? Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Why? So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. So this father, when he is instructing his sons, he's very intentional about the words that he uses here. When he uses the term steadfast love and faithfulness, you know, he has in mind a man named Moses, the one who received the law up there on Mount Sinai, including the 10 Commandments. It was by this law that God showed his ancient people how to relate to God and how to relate to each other, how to live with the grain of the universe, with the way God has designed us to relate to him and to one another. And there is a word that is used in the Old Testament to describe the kinds of relationships we are to have with each other and with God. And there are many terms by which we relate to each other. You know what word I'm talking about? The word covenant. For example, one of the terms of the covenant, the first of the 10 Commandments, have no other gods before me. So don't relate to God as if he is simply one of the gods. Another term of the covenant is don't covet anything that someone has that you don't have that you really wish you did have, because if you have a covetous attitude towards somebody, it can hamper your relationship with that person. That's living against the grain, not with the grain. And so these instructions, when he says, let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you, bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, what we come to understand is that this father's teachings were really simply an extension of the covenantal relationship that God had with his people. So in the end, again, it's not just the father's teachings. It is teaching from God himself, handed down to Moses, and all the teachings that we have in the New Testament at this point in time. So how does this father decide what to teach his son? It's not just the will of the father, but it's the will of God. So when the child obeys the parent, he also obeys God. When the child honors the parent, he also honors God. When children disobey their parents, it can be a very, very unpleasant experience. It sure feels like going against the grain, does it not? It sure feels like things are getting all scratched up instead of made beautiful. And so parents should take time to explain to their children that this is really this matter of disobedience is a matter of disobeying God, and resist the temptation to simply scold but never to explain, or to simply punish and never to explain. If there's never any teaching, never any nurturing, never any discipline, which is closely related to the word discipleship, it can make for heartless parenting, or at least a heartless moment in parenting. To teach your children, this is the way of God who wants your heart, is to bring a heartfelt dimension into the relationship. So what is the what? Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart. Why? So that you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Is there anything better than living life under the favor of God and under the favor of those around us? I believe that God's favor often comes to us through other people. When a child lives the way God wants them to live, there's a built-in blessing. It attracts the favor of those around the child. And the child experiences God's favor when we do things God's way. There is a blessing in that. Jesus himself, as a young child, it says in the Gospel of Luke, found favor with God and man as he grew, as he went about his Father's business, living for the Father. The third instruction is in verses 5 and 6, and the end goal here is children who trust God with their hearts. What? What is the what? Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him. I mean, this is a very well-known verse that Melissa referred to, that we've often heard people refer to. But it's significant to know that this verse was initially the instruction of a father to a son. This is for children to trust in the Lord and not lean on their own understanding. Why? Because he will make your paths straight. When we trust in the Lord with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding, we really are living with the grain of the universe, are we not? Does it not make sense that I, the creature, should trust in the Creator rather than trust in myself? It's kind of a no-brainer, but like Melissa said, it can be a pretty hard thing to do when the storms come and things don't go the way we plan for them to go, do we trust God, or we just try to fix everything ourselves? When the Father here speaks of leaning, he's talking about the idea of leaning on something that will support you. When I was still living in my parents' home, there was a balcony, an outside balcony, outside our bedroom. It's kind of neat. From the bedroom, you could, upstairs, second story, you could open the door and walk out onto a balcony. And it had a wooden banister going around the balcony for safety. And over the years, that would begin to deteriorate. And it began to feel like you probably don't want to lean on this because it might lose its strength and you might fall into the yard down below. That's what the Father is talking about. To lean on your own understanding is to lean on something that is insecure and cannot support you. Another way to say don't lean on your own understanding is, in all your ways, acknowledge him. In all of your ways. In the way you do business, in the way you do family life, in the way you do school, in the way you do parenting. In every way, acknowledge him. To acknowledge God is more than accepting or admitting that God exists, but to acknowledge God is to know that you know him by the way you live for him and by him. This book, the Bible, is first and foremost about a relationship with God and not simply a book of rules and regulations from God. The book of Proverbs lifts us above the pursuit of success to knowing God. So the what in this instruction is trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him. Why should you do that? What is the benefit? And he will make your paths straight. A straight path is an easier way to get to your destination than a crooked path. You know, if you go out this lane and turn right, about a quarter mile down the road is a pretty sharp curve. And I know that when I go around that curve, I've got more neurons firing in my brain than when I'm simply driving on the straight part of Ash Grove. And so I love the way recently they have widened Ash Grove, and they've straightened that curve out a little bit. They've also straightened the curve out down by Nicholasville Road a little bit, making it easier. And I actually seen it as a sign. I see it as a sign of God's blessing on us as a church. For us as a church to arrive at the place he wants us to be as a church. It's a good word picture as we transition to a new lead pastor. When I think of your lives, may God make your paths straight. May God make it easier for you to arrive at the destination that he has for you, making a livelihood, raising your children, ministry in the church, everything that God has for you. What a wonderful thought that God would make your paths straight as you trust in him. I pray that blessing on your life. The fourth instruction is found in verses 7 and 8, and the end goal is children who are not wise in their own eyes. The what is, be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Why? It will be healing for your body and refreshment for your bones. Be not wise in your own eyes in many ways summarizes much of the book of Proverbs. If I'm wise in my own eyes, then I shut myself off from the counsel of other people. If you see it differently than me, sorry, you're wrong. Life as I see it is life as it is. It's my way or the highway. This father addressing his son. If his son is wise in his own eyes, he's not going to respond to his father. One of the interesting things about this passage is we have this father giving instructions to his son, but we don't know how the son responded to the counsel of the father. How many times have you heard a version of something like this, or maybe you yourself have said this? In fact, I heard someone say it just recently. When I was young and foolish, when I was a teenager, I thought I knew everything, and I thought my parents didn't know anything. And then they grow to be an adult, and they realize how much, in fact, they didn't know, and how much, in fact, their parents did know. I mean, all those years of experience, how can you not know more? But consider the epitome of foolishness according to Proverbs. There's my eyes, and then there's God's eyes. My eyes are life as I see it. And how far off am I from the way life really is? I don't know. Then there's God's eyes, life as he sees it, which is life as it is. If I'm wise in my own eyes, I put my eyes above God's eyes, and that is the epitome of foolishness. Deuteronomy 6:18 says, "Do what is right in the Lord's eyes." Do what is right in the Lord's sight. To be wise is to not be wise in your own eyes. It's a very wise thing to not be wise in your own eyes. To see life through God's eyes. How do we see life through God's eyes? Reading the Bible is like putting on divine lenses through which we look at the entirety of life. I've spent a lot of time in the Bible, and I've had a lot of arguments with God. It's like, that doesn't seem right. That's not the way I see it. There's something good about arguing with God. If you're arguing with God, as you read his word, at least you're taking his word seriously. And as you read his word, there are actually numerous cases of people arguing with God because they took God seriously. Verse 7 in this instruction is really the kernel of truth from which all other truths in the book of Proverbs germinate. The what is, be not wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. That's like the kernel from which everything else germinates. This is a recurrent theme, fearing the Lord. Here it is stated negatively what it means to fear the Lord. Don't be wise in your own eyes. And then the Father states positively, turn away from evil. That's what it means to fear the Lord, is to turn away from evil. If God hates it, I want to hate it. If God loves it, I want to love it. If God hates it, then I'm afraid to love it. I don't want to love what God hates, and I don't want to hate what God loves. If God loves it, then I'm afraid to not love it. That's what it means to look at life through his perspective. The New Testament says the same thing in 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desire of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. The what is, be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. The why is, in verse 7, it will be healing to your flesh or your body and refreshment to your bones. We are so psychosomatic. Psyche, the Greek word for soul. Soma, the Greek word for body. What happens in our psyche has a profound impact on our bodies. And medical research bears that out. The fifth instruction is in verses 9 and 10. The end goal is children who honor God. Here's the what. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be, and here's the why, then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. This father is expecting and planning on this son to live with the grain of the universe, and by so doing, to be a successful person. But he wants his son to attribute this success to God and honor him with the first fruits of his crops, assuming an agrarian society here. You know, you till the soil, you plant the seed, you fertilize, you do weed control, you water, and then there is the fruit of the crop. And you take the very first fruits of that crop and you give it to the Lord. In an ancient Israel, they did that in a very practical way by bringing it to the temple and giving it to the Lord. It was a way of saying, all that I have is from the good hand of God, and I really am trusting him. I'm not going to wait till the end of the season to give some leftovers. No, I'm going to give the first fruits. In the New Testament, that principle is seek the kingdom first in terms of our time, our money, and all these necessities of life will be added to you. So God, I give, I trust you to take care of my needs. The sixth and final instruction is in verses 11 and 12. The end goal, and this time I'm going to put it on the parents and not the children. The end goal is parents who delight in their children. Here's the what. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. Why? For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, and as an earthly father reproves the son in whom he delights. Children and parents don't often link delight and discipline. It's like, oh, that was a delightful moment of scolding, or that was a delightful moment of confrontation. The moment of discipline may not be delightful, but the result of discipline is, in fact, a more delightful child. It could be something as simple as table manners. You want the salt and you reach across your sibling's plate who's trying to eat, and the sibling finds an elbow in their face. The polite, considerate thing to do would be to ask for the salt rather than reach for the salt. Parents who teach good table manners, the result is a more delightful child. And again, it can be tempting to neglect discipline, especially if the child is hard to discipline. It takes so much energy. I know a father of 5 who has one child, and he says that one child takes more parental energy than all his other children put together. And I have observed this father with his child, and there were times when there was confrontation in the press of life, when there wasn't time to sit down and to teach and to explain. But I've also seen this father develop a pattern of including times when there were teachings and time away and having a heart-to-heart relationship about something that happened back there that should not have happened, that was of a more serious nature. In the Old Testament, we have examples of some very well-known saints who neglected the discipline of their children. You remember Eli, the Old Testament priest before the temple was built, but the house of the Lord was there at Shiloh. And it explicitly makes the point that he did not interfere with his sons and let his sons do what they wanted to do. He was not disciplining his sons. They were having sex with women who served at the house of the Lord. And it was very disruptive to the spirituality, not only of that family, but the nation of Israel, and the results were disastrous. The interesting thing about that story is, that little boy Samuel, that was something of a foster child, that Eli raised because his mother dedicated him to the Lord. Samuel, as a little boy, and as he grew up, he saw the neglect of Eli and the disastrous consequences. But when Samuel grew up, he neglected to discipline his children, and the results were disastrous. And then there is the most celebrated king in the whole history of Israel, David. He neglected to discipline his sons, and the results were disastrous. The point of this last teaching of this father to his son is that just as an earthly father disciplines their children because they delight in them, so it is that the heavenly Father disciplines his children not because he is disgusted with them, but because he takes delight in us. The same point is made in Hebrews chapter 12, 5-11. Besides this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. Discipline instills respect in the child toward the parent when it's done in a godly, non-abusive way. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best for them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may see his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, or we could say delightful, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. He disciplines those he loves. When he disciplines us, he treats us as his beloved children. When we discipline our children, we treat them as our beloved children.